the veil of Maya and its great illusion, the eternal journey of self-discovery and acceptance, the hidden side that fights for coexistence within the individual. In order to convey my interpretation of the VCR in question in relation to Taekook and them being the only ones to exhibit a blue aura, as well as dark representations of themselves as they run alongside the other 5 shining members, it's necessary for us to dive into Carl Jung's psychoanalytical theories and fuse them with concepts found in the film known as the Matrix, both of them having a big presence throughout BTS's career. Multiple eras will make an appearance, eventually tying all of this with Namjoon's speech at the United Nations Assembly. The Matrix is given a main role in BTS's music video for NO, where they incorporate the popular red pill versus blue pill dilemma. In it, BTS are initially behaving like programmed robots under the strict control of society, but after taking the red pill, they begin to look around, seemingly coming to a realization which leads to a rebellion against the system. In short, this refers to the choice between revealing an unpleasant or otherwise life-changing truth represented by the red pill and remaining in blissful ignorance represented by the blue pill. With the red pill comes an uncertain future. It frees you from the enslaving control of the machine-generated dream world and allows you to escape into the real world, but living the truth of reality is harsher and more difficult. The blue pill represents a beautiful prison, living in ignorance and confined comfort without want or fear, within the simulated reality, the illusion of the Matrix. Whenever BTS make use of the contrast between the red and blue colors, they are making a reference to this dilemma. In Shadow's music video, we can see Yoongi performing on top of a blue stage for a public that scrutinizes his every move, while his confined shadows try to escape the blue prison, searching for him through a narrow hallway as they leave red stains on the walls. The shadows finally burst the door open and take possession of the individual, which is a phenomenon that can occur after an over-identification with a public persona and denial of one's dark side, falling into extremes. We can then see the stage and overall scenery turn red as the shadow manifests itself and takes control. 2 different Yoongis face each other, showing the duality of human nature. The shadow warns him he will only find peace once he recognizes its existence. The shadow is a collection of the unconscious aspects of the personality that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself. It's the unknown side. The shadow is largely negative, but there are, however, positive aspects that may remain hidden due to low self-esteem, anxieties, false beliefs, and social pressures. On the other hand, the persona is a social face the individual presents to the world, a kind of mask designed to make a definite impression upon others and to conceal the true nature of the individual. So you can say it's a simulated reality, a facade, and in BTS's videos, like in The Matrix, it's linked to the color blue. Nevertheless, the development of a viable and flexible persona is a vital part of adapting to adult life in the external social world. The danger is that of identifying with a fixed persona, having no concept of oneself as a being that is distinct from what society expects from you, overly concerned for what people think, which entails suffering, and the repressed shadow may then unconsciously manifest through addictive behaviors that stem from undealt roots. Carl Jung thought that this distinction between the self and the collective psychology was a natural and necessary process for the equilibrium of the psyche. This process is called individuation and has a healing effect on the person. It requires the assimilation of the personal and collective unconscious that are brought into light by different means, such as dreams, active imagination, or free association. Here, we see Taeyoung surrounded by a blue light, struggling and bending over as if having an internal battle with something that wanted to be set free. The anxiety dissipates once he's engulfed by a deep red. Individuation is not possible without an encounter with the shadow and transitory disintegration of the persona, of that excessive commitment to collective ideals that mask individuality. This disintegration may lead initially to a state of chaos and disorientation upon a stark encounter with one's own reality, removing false veils. The dissolution of the persona brings the danger of falling victim to the shadow. The conscious personality should integrate the shadow and not vice versa, otherwise the confrontation produces a standstill that hampers moral decisions and makes convictions ineffective. However, Jung believed that every descent is followed by an ascent, making the proper assimilation of the shadow a real possibility, being aware of it rather than consumed by it. According to Jung, the meeting with oneself is, at first, a meeting with one's own shadow. The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well, but one must learn to know oneself in order to know who one is. Only when we confront and accept that part of ourselves which we chose to repress or had never been aware of, can we proceed to our personal growth by integrating the shadow into our conscious life in a healthy way, finding adequate outlets or ignoring superficial or pointless customs, as well as imposed standards and expectations, ultimately reaching balance and harmony with the self. There is, in fact, no access to the unconscious and to our own reality but through the shadow. Jung also viewed this door into the unconscious as a getaway through which dreams infiltrate the conscious mind in the form of symbols that help increase individual self-understanding. The goal of individuation is for people to develop a more realistic, flexible persona that helps them navigate in society but does not collide with nor hide their true self. It's what BTS achieved at the end of their music video for On. The start of one's journey towards individuation is depicted in Wing's era, and is the reason the first song of the album is called Begin.
The rhythms of day and night, two different words coming from two opposite poles, mingled during this time. My parents' house made up one rhythm. This rhythm was familiar to me in almost every way. Mother and father, love and strictness, model behavior, and school. The other rhythm, however, overlapping half our house, was completely different. A loud mixture of horrendous, intriguing, frightful, mysterious things, including tales of robberies, murders, and suicides. It was the first fissure in the columns that had upheld my childhood, which every individual must destroy before he can become himself.
They are referencing the dissolution of the childish persona after first meeting their shadow and the transition into adulthood by creating a new flexible persona.
The bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy a world. The bird flies to God. That God's name is Abraxas.
Here, they use the same symbolism to represent Taekook's shadow. They awaken, become aware of it, and embrace it. We've seen this black ink on different members on previous eras, such as Blood, Sweat, and Tears. This song is all about falling into temptation and their first tentative exploration of their shadow during their adolescence. In the video, they are initially blind because they're showing the transition between being in ignorance and awakening.
He too was a tempter. He too was a link to the second, the evil world with which I no longer wanted to have anything to do.
After the red appears, the eyes gain sight, and a veil is lifted, revealing a dark fallen angel, a devil, in other words, the shadow. This veil is a reference to the veil of Maya, which means the veil of illusions. If we are not aware of our shadow, we project it onto others, and this prevents us and the world from seeing each other clearly, with a veil in between, living in blissful ignorance. The lifting of the veil coincides with a moment of self-discovery and disintegration of the previously known persona, as Namjoon quoted from the book Demian. One must first destroy a world to be reborn and become himself. In this case, the world is the persona, the mask. In the video for Boy Meets Evil, Hoseok jumps between two worlds. When he gives into temptation, he explores the dark and known side. There, the walls are covered in red. In the live version of Boy Meets Evil, they show you the contrast between these two worlds with the red and blue colors. However, the visuals are depicting the face prior to the enlightenment. Like in his solo song, Jimin is caught in a lie. He's blindfolded and can't see the red world that surrounds him, while Hoseok is living in a blue simulated reality. Jimin then takes off the blindfold and Blood, Sweat and Tears begins. This finally brings us to the enigmatic VCR. It starts with them under the veil of Maya, going through the internal process of assimilation of the unconscious. Jung thought that during this process, the personality went through many transformations, which is shown by different lights linked to changing moods. Jung viewed color as symbolic of psychic processes and correlated 4 primary colors, red, blue, green, and yellow, with the 4 psychic functions. In the VCR, we can see Jungkook covered in yellow light, which corresponds to the intuition function. So in this precise moment, while under the veil, the colors red and blue correspond to the feeling and thinking functions. They are in the middle of self-exploration, going through changing moods. Anyhow, the meaning of these 2 colors shifts when they start seeing their hidden shadows. Taeyoung's red shadow covers his own mouth, being forced into silence and trying to reach out. Once they became aware of their repressed side and the time comes to lift the veil, Taekook are the only ones to remain covered in blue. It seems meaningful because 2 out of 7 is not a balanced proportion. Remember, they also went through the process of self-discovery, but they are the only ones that are still unable to show us the big truth they discovered within themselves, instead showing us a restricted facade, a simulated blue reality, a pretty lie they molded for us. We'll now go over Singularity before coming back to the VCR. In it, Taeyoung is awakened by his unconscious. Although he tries to ignore it, he can't. Now, we see Taeyoung in a red room, saying he does not have a voice. He's talking about his repressed shadow. He talks about hearing his persona slowly cracking, but not quite breaking, because he is preventing it from happening. He has trapped his rejected self inside a frozen lake, which is shown as a blue prison. His shadow is hidden under his blue persona. He says he has buried himself in order to maintain people's love for him, but that doing this causes him a lot of pain, feeling like he lost himself.
Looking back, I think that's when I began to worry about what other people thought of me and starting seeing myself through their eyes. I just tried to jam myself
into the malls that other people made. Soon, I began to shut out my own voice and started to listen to the voices of others. No one called out my name, and neither did I. My heart stopped and my eyes closed shut. There was a small voice inside of me that said, "Wake up, man, and listen to yourself. I have many faults, and I have many more fears, but I'm gonna embrace myself as hard as I can, just little by little."
In Taeyoung's song Inner Child, he says he is now doing better. That he believes in himself and therefore accepts himself.
I have come to love myself for who I am, for who I was, and for who I hope to become.
The past, present, and future eventually exist in
The
us.
7 running figures are the members in their journey towards individuation. Taeyoung is on the far left, while Jungkook is in the middle. They run towards the light, and Taekook are darker than the rest of the members because they are behind in the process of individuation, which requires the development of a persona that shows the true nature of the individual. Taekook's current persona restricts their true self to a greater extent. This clip can also make reference to the level of self-acceptance achieved, as it's also part of the journey of individuation. The purple represents the combination of their different sides, the whole of their being.
These faults and mistakes are what I am, making up the brightest stars in the constellation of my life. Let's take all one more step. We have learned to love ourselves. So now I urge you to speak yourself. Tell me your story. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear your conviction. No matter who you are, where you're from, your skin color, your gender identity, just speak yourself.